I stood outside that hotel room door with flowers in my hand and my entire future about to collapse. The sounds coming from inside weren't what I expected. They weren't laughter or music. They were intimate, wrong. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, and in that single moment, I realized something terrifying. Your soul always knows the truth before your mind is ready to face it. Everything I thought I knew about the woman I was going to marry was about to shatter in ways I never imagined possible. Hello, friends. Before we dive deeper, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Florida, United Kingdom, maybe South Africa or Jamaica? We want to know. My name is Michael, and 3 years ago, I thought I had life figured out. I was 32, working as a project manager at a tech firm in Seattle, and engaged to a woman I believed was my soulmate. Her name was Sarah. She was driven, intelligent, beautiful in that effortless way that made heads turn when we walked into restaurants together. We met at a mutual friend's wedding 5 years earlier, and from our first conversation about everything from philosophy to our favorite terrible movies, I knew she was different, special, the kind of person you build a life with. Sarah worked in pharmaceutical sales, a job that demanded constant travel across the West Coast. Portland one week, San Francisco the next. Sometimes Los Angeles for major conferences. In the beginning, I admired her ambition. She was climbing fast in her company, earning bonuses that made my steady salary look modest, talking about partnerships and equity stakes. When she traveled, we'd video call every night. She'd show me her hotel room, complain about bland convention center food, tell me she missed me. I never questioned it. Why would I? We were planning a wedding for the following spring. We'd already put deposits down on a venue in the San Juan Islands, a beautiful spot overlooking the water where we'd say our vows in front of 100 guests. The doubt started small, so small I didn't even recognize it as doubt at first. It was more like a whisper in the back of my mind, easy to ignore when everything else seemed so solid. Sarah had always been affectionate, the type to text me throughout the day with inside jokes or photos of something random that reminded her of us. But over the past 6 months, those messages had become less frequent. When I mentioned it once, she'd laughed it off, saying work was overwhelming, that she was in back-to-back meetings. It made sense. I let it go. Looking back now, I can see the pattern I missed then. The way she'd angle her phone away from me during our video calls, just slightly, as if she was watching something else on her laptop. How she started suggesting I not come along on weekend work trips, even the ones to cities I'd mentioned wanting to visit. "You'd be bored," she'd say with a smile. "I'll be stuck in conference rooms the whole time. Let's save our travel for vacations, just the two of us." It sounded reasonable, considerate even. So I stayed home, trusted her completely, and focused on wedding planning, on picking out tuxedos, and debating whether we wanted a DJ or a live band. The trip to Portland was supposed to be just another routine business conference. 3 days, she told me, Thursday through Saturday. She'd be back Sunday afternoon, exhausted, but happy to be home. I had the weekend to myself, which usually meant catching up with friends, maybe working on the bike I was restoring in our garage. But Friday morning, something shifted in me. Maybe it was the way she'd seemed almost relieved when she kissed me goodbye at the door, or how she'd checked her phone 3 times during that kiss. Maybe it was just instinct. Whatever it was, I decided to surprise her. I called a florist near her hotel and ordered her favorite flowers, white peonies with eucalyptus. Then I booked a table at a restaurant I knew she'd been wanting to try in downtown Portland, a place with a view of the Willamette River that had a 6-month wait list unless you knew someone, which I did. I packed an overnight bag, told my boss I needed a personal day, and drove the 3 hours north with a playlist of songs that reminded me of our early dates. I felt good, excited even. I imagined her face when I showed up at her hotel, how she'd laugh and fall into my arms, maybe tease me for being romantic. I rehearsed what I'd say. "I couldn't wait until Sunday to see you." When I'd suggested surprising her on a work trip once before, months earlier, she'd shut it down fast. Too fast, I realize now. "Michael, I love the thought, but it would be so awkward with my colleagues around. They don't really know about us in that way, you know? Let's keep work and personal separate." At the time, it seemed professional, mature. Now those words echoed differently in my memory, but this time I didn't ask permission, I just went. I arrived in Portland around 6 in the evening, checked into a different hotel nearby so I could shower and change, then headed to her hotel with the flowers in hand. The hotel was upscale, the kind with marble floors and soft jazz playing in the lobby. I knew her room number because she'd texted it to me earlier that week in case of emergency. Fourth floor, room 447. I took the elevator up, heart beating with anticipation, already imagining the look on her face. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in a pattern of soft grays and blues, the kind of silence that exists in expensive hotels where sound doesn't carry. As I walked toward her room, I practiced my opening line one more time. I was smiling, actually smiling. Then I heard it. At first I thought maybe I had the wrong room, that I'd misremembered the number. But no, there it was, 447, and the sound was definitely coming from inside. It wasn't loud, but in that quiet hallway, it was unmistakable. A man's voice, low and intimate. Then her laugh, the one I knew so well, breathy and genuine. The flowers suddenly felt heavy in my hand. My mouth went dry. I stood there frozen, maybe for 10 seconds, maybe for a full minute. Time stopped making sense. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the television. Maybe she was on a work call with a colleague, and I was misinterpreting the tone. But my body knew. My hands started shaking. My heart wasn't racing. It was sinking, dropping into my stomach like a stone. I want to ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. Have you ever had a moment where you knew your life was about to change forever? Where you stood at a crossroads and understood that what you did next would define everything that came after? That was me in that hallway. I could have walked away. Part of me wanted to. I could have gone back to my hotel, thrown the flowers in a trash can, driven home, and pretended I'd never come. Maybe I could have convinced myself I'd misheard, that I was being paranoid, that there was a reasonable explanation I just hadn't thought of yet. But I didn't walk away. Maybe it was courage. Maybe it was just pain demanding answers. But I raised my hand and knocked on the door. The sounds inside stopped immediately. Complete silence. Then footsteps, quick and light. I heard whispering, frantic and hushed. My stomach turned. The door opened just a crack. And there she was, Sarah. Her hair was messy, not styled the way she usually wore it for work events. She was wearing a hotel robe, white and plush, tied loosely at the waist. Her eyes went wide when she saw me, not with joy or surprise, but with fear, pure, unmistakable fear. Michael, she said, and her voice cracked on my name. She didn't open the door wider. She stood in the gap, blocking my view inside, and for a moment neither of us moved. "What are you doing here?" she asked, and the question felt like a slap. Not, "I'm so happy to see you," or, "What a wonderful surprise," but, "What are you doing here?" As if I was the one in the wrong, as if I'd violated some unspoken rule. I looked down at the flowers in my hand, suddenly ridiculous and childish. "I wanted to surprise you," I said, and my voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. "I thought we could have dinner together." She didn't reach for the flowers. She just stared at me, and I watched her mind work, calculating, trying to figure out what I'd heard, what I knew, what she could still salvage. Behind her, I heard movement, a cough. Then a man's voice, clearer now. "Sarah, everything okay?" My chest tightened. I looked past her into the room, and that's when I saw him. Tall, maybe mid-30s, wearing dress pants and an undershirt, standing near the bed. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled, pillows on the floor. He looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. Not guilt exactly, but awkwardness. Like he'd just realized he was part of something messier than he'd signed up for. "Who's that?" I asked, though I already knew. Sarah closed her eyes. And when she opened them again, they were filled with tears. "Michael, let me explain. If you're still here, comment, 'I'm still watching.' Some moments change a person forever, and this was one of mine." She stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind her, leaving him inside. We stood there facing each other, her in that robe and me still holding those stupid flowers. "How long?" I asked. My voice was calm. which surprised me. I thought I'd yell or cry, but instead I just felt numb, like my emotions had shut down to protect me from the full weight of what was happening. She looked down at her bare feet on the carpet. Michael, it's not what you think. That line, that cliche, insulting line. I almost laughed. How long, Sarah? I repeated, firmer this time. She wrapped her arms around herself. A few months. It just happened. I didn't plan it. We met at a conference in San Diego, and we just started talking. And it wasn't supposed to mean anything. A few months, while I was picking out wedding invitations, while I was calling caterers and tasting cake flavors, while I was lying in our bed at night thinking about our future. Does he know about me? I asked. She nodded slowly. He knows. He's not looking for anything serious. It's just physical, Michael. It doesn't change how I feel about you. I stared at her, trying to find the woman I'd fallen in love with in the face in front of me. But she looked like a stranger. You're still wearing your engagement ring, I said. And I don't know why that detail stood out to me in that moment, but it did. She looked down at her hand as if she'd forgotten it was there. I love you, she said, and her voice broke. I know I messed up. I know this is terrible. But I do love you, Michael. I want to marry you. This was just a mistake, a stupid mistake that got out of hand. I wanted to believe her. Part of me desperately wanted to rewind time, to go back to an hour earlier when I was driving up here with flowers and hope. But I couldn't unhear what I'd heard, couldn't unsee what I'd just seen. If you loved me, I said quietly, you wouldn't have done this, and you definitely wouldn't have kept doing it for months. The door behind her opened slightly, and the man poked his head out. Look, man, I didn't know it was this serious between you two, he said. And I could tell he was trying to diffuse the situation, maybe make himself feel less guilty. I looked at him, this stranger who'd been part of destroying my life, and I felt nothing but exhaustion. Get out, I said, not to him, to both of them, to the whole situation. I dropped the flowers on the hallway floor and walked away. Sarah called after me. Michael, please, can we just talk about this? But I didn't stop. I got back in the elevator, rode down to the lobby, walked past the doorman who'd smiled at me on my way in, and got in my car. I drove to a parking lot overlooking the river and just sat there for hours. I watched the sun set, watched the city lights come on, watched people walk by laughing and holding hands, living normal lives that hadn't just imploded. I kept replaying everything in my mind, searching for signs I'd missed, clues I should have seen, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the times she'd come home and seemed distant, distracted, the way she'd started putting her phone face down on the table. How had I been so blind? Or had I seen it and just refused to believe it? My phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from Sarah, but I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Around midnight, I checked into a cheap motel off the highway and lay awake in a bed that smelled like bleach and old cigarettes, staring at the ceiling and wondering how you rebuild a life after it's been shattered. The next morning, I drove home. Sarah had sent me 47 messages overnight. Most of them were apologies, desperate and rambling, promising to end it with him, begging for another chance, saying she'd do anything to fix this. A few were angry, accusing me of overreacting, of not even giving her a chance to explain properly. One message, sent at 3 in the morning, just said, I'm so sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me. I read them all in the parking lot of a gas station somewhere between Portland and Seattle, and with each one I felt the future we'd planned together dissolve a little more. The wedding, the house we'd been saving for, the kids we'd talked about naming, all of it gone. When I got home, I packed her things, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I couldn't look at her clothes in our closet, her books on our shelves, her coffee mug by the sink. I filled boxes methodically, carefully, like I was packing up a museum exhibit of a relationship that used to exist. By the time she came home that Sunday afternoon, everything was stacked neatly by the door. She walked in, saw the boxes, and started crying immediately. Michael, please don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. People make mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are accidental. This was a choice, made over and over again for months. Was he the only one? I asked. The question had been gnawing at me since Portland. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I got my answer. There was someone else, she admitted quietly. Last year, just once, at a conference in Denver. My legs felt weak. I sat down on the couch we'd picked out together at IKEA 3 years ago, assembled together on a Sunday afternoon while drinking beer and laughing at the incomprehensible instructions. How many times, Sarah? How many people? She shook her head. Just two, I swear. And they didn't mean anything. You're the one I want to be with. But here's what I learned in that moment. And it's something I want you to think about as you navigate your own relationships and your own life. Love isn't just about wanting to be with someone. It's about choosing them every single day, even when other options present themselves. It's about respecting them enough to be honest, to protect what you've built together, to value their trust above your own momentary desires. Sarah had failed at all of that, not once but repeatedly. And as much as it hurt, as much as I wanted to rewind time and make this whole nightmare disappear, I knew I couldn't marry someone I couldn't trust. I called off the wedding 2 days later, sent messages to our families, canceled the venue, lost the deposits. Some people asked if I was sure, if I was being too hasty, if everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe they're right about second chances in some situations. But this wasn't a single lapse in judgment. This was a pattern, a double life she'd been living while I planned our future. 6 months later, I heard through a mutual friend that Sarah was seeing someone new, someone from her company. I felt nothing when I heard that news. No jealousy, no pain, just a quiet relief that I'd dodged something far worse than a canceled wedding. Now, 2 years after that hallway, I'm rebuilding, slowly, dating again, carefully, learning to trust, though it doesn't come as easily as it used to. But I'm grateful, in a strange way, for that trip to Portland, because sometimes the worst moments in our lives are also the most necessary. Sometimes God or fate, or whatever you believe in, lets you hear the truth so you don't spend your life living a lie. What would you have done? Would you have knocked on that door? Would you have walked away or confronted the truth head on? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this stay with you long after they end, subscribe for more real, emotional journeys that remind us truth always finds a way to be heard.